What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel. 2 weeks left in the regular season. Guys, that's all we got. November is coming to a close very, very fast, but we still got 2 weeks left to enjoy the college football season. And entering week 12, there have been some changes here in my top 25 and even some changes towards the top, especially in my top 10, and even some teams switching around here in the top 5. So you're going to want to stick around to see what those are. But guys, we got 2 weeks left, and as the contenders more so separate themselves from the rest of the pack, we are coming down the home stretch in the college football season. But before we dive on into my updated top 25, you guys know I just got to say thank you for the support the channel has seen as of late. It does mean a lot to me, and any way you interact with the channel helps to support it a huge way. And a lot of people don't realize this is just simply by watching the video, you're helping to support the channel. So thank you guys so much. But there are other ways. The biggest way, hitting the subscribe button, ringing the bell so you know when videos get uploaded. But you can also like, you can comment, you can share, you can check out my community tab, and really anything else that you do to help support and interact with the channel. It does mean a lot to me. But with all that out of the way, let's dive on into the top 25. But you guys know I got to go through the honorable mention list first. So going through the honorable mention list here real quickly. As you'll notice, not a whole lot of Power 5 teams. I believe that there's starting to be a clear division in terms of who are the teams in the Power 5 that can get into my top 25 and who aren't. And there is a new addition here, a logo that I should have had last week that I didn't, a logo that I should have had on the honorable mention list last week that I didn't. It's the NC State Wolfpack. They're here with the ACC partner in the Duke Blue Devils, 2 teams that I feel like are playing some pretty good football right now. Duke, of course, almost able to win that game against North Carolina. You were able to win that one, probably inside of my top 25, but they fell just short, so they are still here on the honorable mention list. You'll notice Kansas did fall out of my poll from this past week after losing to the Texas Tech Red Raiders there at home. So that's still going to be a team to watch, though. Still a team I feel like can break in to the top 25. USC is another team sitting right there as well. They only have 1 game left. Likely will not get into the Pac-12 championship game. And if everything goes right, maybe they can get back into the top 25 poll. But there are a ton of group of 5 teams here. Let's talk about them. The Liberty Flames right now for me are team number 26. They are sitting undefeated, one of only 7 undefeated teams left across the country. And if Liberty's able to win next week and the week after, maybe there's some chaos ahead of them as well. I'm kind of going to have no choice but to rank the Liberty Flames here. Again, they're very, very close for me. Yes, the resume is not super comparable as to what some of the other teams have played, and a lot of Flames fans out there probably saying, you have to rank us where undefeated. You guys are team number 26. So if I had a 26 slot, that's where the Liberty Flames would be. But there are so many more teams here. Toledo out of the Mid-American Conference, still playing really good football. You could even put Miami of Ohio out of the same conference on this list as well. SMU and Memphis, maybe even UTSA are teams that are still alive for the group of 5 race in the American Athletic Conference. Fresno State was in my poll this past week, but they lost. They dropped out. Still a team I think can get back into the top 25. And then how about the UNLV Rebels? They see their first time on the honorable mention list this year, but none of these teams did make my top 25. Let's see who did. Starting with 2 teams that really fell since last week, and they fell because of their loss. They fell because of the way they lost, and they also fell because there were some teams that I thought jumped ahead of them. That's the Oklahoma State Sooners at 25, and at 24, it's the Tennessee Volunteers. We'll start with the Oklahoma State Cowboys, not Sooners. I will take all the heat for that one in the comment section below. The Oklahoma State Cowboys. This is a team that got absolutely curb stomped by the UCF Knights. By the way, space uniforms look really, really good. I love those jerseys. But when you take a look at how the Oklahoma State Cowboys lost that game, I mean, just Ollie Gordon was really nowhere to be seen. The defense wasn't even moving at all. And yes, it was rainy. It was wet. It was windy. It should have been a day where offense was very hard to come by, and yet it flowed really smoothly for UCF. The defense for Oklahoma State couldn't keep up, and the offense for Oklahoma State just couldn't do anything, period. So they dropped 12 spots here to number 25. Number 24 is the Tennessee Volunteers. Again, still think that this is a really good football team, but you just ended up getting absolutely murdered by Missouri, who I think a lot of people's opinions of this Missouri Tiger team are really, really starting to flip around. We'll talk about Missouri when we get to Missouri, but the Tennessee Volunteers are here at number 24. Joe Milton just did not play well. That Tennessee defense just did not play well. You got a date with Georgia. You lose that one. Depending on what else happens, you may drop out of the top 25, but you can't really punish them too much given where Georgia is in my rankings, and you'll see that reflective here in a minute. We got two teams that weren't ranked this past week that are now ranked in my poll. We got the Iowa Hawkeyes here at number 23. I think it is crazy that the under there on that game, or I should say the over-under on the game between Iowa and Rutgers was like 27.5, 28.5, something absolutely stupidly low like that, and the under still hit. Iowa ended up blanking a pretty darn good Rutgers team there, 22-0. And in all likelihood moving forward here, I mean, the Iowa Hawkeyes right now are in the driver's seat in the Big Ten West. So if they can keep it going, they can keep winning. Do have a couple of really interesting games coming up here on the schedule, as your next game here is slated to be the Illinois Fighting Illini, which you got to watch out for. They just put up a lot of offense this past week. And then, of course, from the Nebraska Cornhuskers there on Black Friday. So if everything goes well, you'll see Iowa in the Big Ten championship game again. North Carolina, you will not see in the ACC championship game, but they're starting to play a lot better football. Now, is the defense playing a lot better of football? No. Quite simply, no. But the offense has continued to move, right? Devontae Walker continues to be a difference maker for this North Carolina team. Drake May is a really, really good quarterback. He's a game changer and an absolute thrilling game there against the Duke Blue Devils this past week. North Carolina Tar Heels are sitting at number 21, but ahead of them is a team that you see currently undefeated right now, the James Madison Dukes. To me, right now, ranked number 21 in the country. There are just some teams that are ahead of them that I end up liking a little bit more, but now you see James Madison slowly starting to climb slowly starting to climb my rankings here in the top 25. I just love the way that James Madison is playing football. I think this is a great story in and out. Second year in the FBS. We'll see if the NCAA is going to end up approving James Madison for this appeal that they have pushed forward to try to get their transition periods shortened so they can participate in the postseason without having to rely on the team, or on, I should say, not enough teams falling at the 500 mark. Love the way that James Madison's playing. College game day is going to be in Harrisonburg this upcoming week. When they play the App State Mountaineers. I really hope James Madison can finish the season undefeated, and if they continue to win, well, they're just going to continue to climb my rankings there. They are at number 21. Let's dive on into the top 20. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish did not play this past week, so they have no reason to move up or down. You have the Wake Forest Demon Deacons, and then you have the Stanford Cardinal coming up there in your final two games. Two very, very winnable games here for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, who currently sit 7-3. Maybe a little bit of a disappointing year for this Notre Dame team. However, this team still has a lot of really good pieces and still have every opportunity in front of them to finish this season strong. Likely will not get into a New Year's Six bowl game, but still has a great opportunity to finish out the season really, really strong. The Kansas State Wildcats have jumped up 5 spots here to number 19. They absolutely thrashed Baylor this past week. An interesting game coming up there, a road game against the Kansas Jayhawks. That quarterback situation for Kansas is going to be very, very interesting, as Jason Bean went down in the game against Texas Tech, and we know that Jalen Daniels has been dealing with back problems throughout the majority of this season. So it'll be interesting to see what Kansas is able to put together there in that game, especially with the quarterback position. And it's a rivalry that Kansas State dominates. But this is a team in Kansas that has flipped scripts all season long. Kansas State has got to watch out. That's going to be a raucous environment there in Lawrence, but everything I've seen from Kansas State, technically, I believe, still alive in the race for a Big 12 championship appearance as well. That's going to be a huge game against Kansas there, but just playing really, really well are the Kansas State Wildcats. And there's another Wildcat team that's playing really well right now too, and that's the Arizona Wildcats, all the way from Tucson. The Jed Fish, what a job he has done here with this team. They currently sit 7-3. They are performing above expectations for what a lot of people had for the Arizona Wildcats this season. Big game coming up here against the Utah Utes. That is going to be possibly a program-defining moment if Arizona is able to get by Utah and if Arizona is able to win that game. That is going to be a phenomenal test there to watch, but I love the way that this Wildcat team is playing. I love the job that Jed Fish has done. Arizona jumped up 4 spots from last week. They also jumped up 4 spots from last week, and they are the Group of 5 team that right now is the committee's favorite to get into a New Year's Six bowl game. It's the Tulane Green Wave. Now, you do have a game against UTSA coming up here at the end of the season. That's going to be a very, very interesting game because it ultimately could decide potentially home field advantage in the American Athletic Championship game. SMU and Memphis technically still alive for that as well. But by far and away, with the losses that Fresno State and Air Force suffered this past week, Tulane now is by far and away, unless James Madison gets that waiver approved, the favorite to get into a New Year's Six bowl game and the dynamite favorite to get into a New Year's Six bowl game as the Group of 5 representative. The Utah Utes have fallen 1 spot here to number 16. Not going to fault Utah too much for that loss there against the Washington Huskies. They currently sit as a top 5 team in a ton of people's eyes, and with the with Utah just coming up barely short. I mean, they were this close. The offense is finally woken up here. The defense had its really, really good moments at times there against Washington. That offense is just too dynamic for you to stop all game long. Utah definitely did see their struggles with that as well. But for the Utes, not going to punish them too much for that loss there to the Washington Huskies. They only fall 1 spot here to number 16. Again, the big one against Arizona is coming up this week. That's going to be a very, very interesting game to watch. As we dive on into the top 15 here, a couple of more familiar faces as we enter the top 15. The Oklahoma Sooners have found themselves back in the top 15, as have the LSU Tigers. The Oklahoma Sooners finally were able to get back on track. They were able to win their game against West Virginia this past week after suffering 2 straight losses to the Kansas Jayhawks and the Oklahoma State Cowboys. So moving forward here, the Oklahoma Sooners, I believe, technically still alive in the Big 12 title race. However, when you really take a look at it, there are a lot of tiebreaker things that have to happen. Oklahoma's going to need a lot of teams ahead of them to fall if they're going to want to make the Big 12 title game. So, I mean, really, when you take a look at this Oklahoma Sooners team, it's just about finishing strong. You have a road game against BYU coming up this week. You can't sleep on that one either. BYU has got a lot of very solid pieces. That's going to be a very interesting game to watch for them. LSU, of course, back into the top 15. They sit here at number 14. They move up 3 spots from this past week. Or I should say from my past poll. The LSU Tigers, let's see who they have here moving forward. So you have Georgia State coming up this week. Hey, pretty solid team there out of the Sun Belt Conference. Wouldn't discount them too much, but it should be a win there for the LSU Tigers. And then you also have the rivalry game to cap off the season in the Texas A&M Aggies. Another very interesting game because they just fired their head coach, Jimbo Fisher. So we will see what the LSU is made of here moving forward. But I do like the way that Jalen Daniels is playing. They had 700 total yards there against the Florida Gators. Love the way that Jaden Daniels is playing. They got some of the best wide receivers in the country. And while the defense definitely still has a lot of room to work for, LSU has a great opportunity to finish strong here over these next 2 weeks. Let's take a look here at the Penn State Nittany Lions as they fall 4 spots here to number 13. And I got to be honest, when I take a look here at this Penn State team, they probably are not as good as what a lot of people thought they were going to be entering this season. A lot of people thought that they were going to be able to challenge the Ohio State Buckeyes. They were going to be able to challenge the Michigan Wolverines. And yes, they lost both of those games by single digits. But if you go back and watch both of those games, Ohio State really beat Penn State 20-6 instead of 20-12. And then even when you take a look at that Michigan game, that's a game that Michigan probably ultimately should have won by a whole lot more, given if the weather conditions were maybe a little bit nicer than what they were. But for the Penn State Nittany Lions. The weakness of this team has been able to drive the ball down the field. They haven't been able to do that, and because they haven't been able to do that, they haven't been able to beat the teams that, well, I guess they're just not supposed to be. So Penn State's fallen down here to number 13. Still a great shot to get into a New Year's Six bowl game. You finish off the season here. Last game of the season, you end up going to play the Michigan State Spartans, and we know about the dumpster fire that they are this year. Trying to remember their last game, or the game coming up this week here. It is against the Rutgers Scarlet Knights at home. So lots of opportunities for Penn State still to be able to win these games and finish out strong, get into a New Year's Six spot, but they still sit behind Michigan and Ohio State in the ranks of the Big Ten. They're sitting here at number 13. Sitting here at number 12 is the Ole Miss Rebels. I do not punish them too much for that loss to the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia just looks really, really good, and there wasn't really a whole lot that Ole Miss was going to be able to do about it. Yes, there are a lot of teams that end up jumping the Ole Miss Rebels, some teams that I thought just ultimately played that ultimately played better, and ultimately maybe as of right now I would favor on a neutral field, but I still think Ole Miss is playing really, really well. The defense got absolutely shredded, but yes, it has taken some steps to be an improved unit so far this season. We know what the offense can do. We saw it early in the game against Georgia. They were moving with some really, really good pace. They were moving really, really well. Just ended up getting out-muscled by this Georgia Bulldog unit. So the Ole Miss Rebels, don't punish them too much, but there were some teams that jumped ahead of them. One of those being the Louisville Cardinals. Now, I love what Louisville has done, right? I love the Jeff Brom reuniting with his former quarterback in Purdue, Jack Plummer. Jawar Jordan, Jamari Thrash are some really, really good weapons. But Louisville has had some close calls here in the past couple of weeks, especially this past week to a not very good at all Virginia team. Now, you do have two very, very pivotal games coming up this week, and two games that were by far, when we took a look back at this in November, that were going to be games that ended up really be able to decide how good this Louisville team is. You got to go on the road to play what a lot of people are going to downplay as a pretty good Miami team, and then you get the Kentucky Wildcats. So two interesting, really pivotal games still coming up for the Louisville Cardinals. Be very interesting to see how they play here down the stretch. My top 10 does have some changes, including the Oregon State Beavers. They are into the top 10. Love the way that Oregon State has looked all throughout the year. DJ Uiagalelei has really resurged as a very, very viable quarterback. Oregon State put the absolute thrashing on Stanford this past week, and now Oregon State has the opportunity to really be a team here that can cause some college football playoff chaos, because their last two games of the season, we talked about this in the video back in November. Even though Oregon State was not going to be a contender for the college football playoff, this could be the team. Now, obviously, they're a lot better of a team than what we saw last year with South Carolina, but this could be the team with Oregon State that causes a lot of chaos down the stretch. Your final two games, you get the Washington Huskies at home, and then you have to go on the road in Autzen Stadium to play the Oregon Ducks. Now, easy games? No, neither of them are going to be easy games. But games that Oregon State can win? Absolutely. Absolutely, those are games that Oregon State can win. And you know what? Chances are pretty good that they end up winning at least one of these final two games. So for the Oregon State Beavers moving forward, this is a team that I really, really like. I think they have all the pieces to be able to create some college football playoff chaos. If you are Oregon or Washington, two top 6 teams right now, watch out, because the Oregon State Beavers are coming. But, I mean, come on. Let's talk about the Missouri Tigers. I know. I did not predict this team to finish well, but again, predictions are made to be broken. When I take a look at my prediction for Missouri back in the preseason, I don't look at that and say, oh, I got it wrong. I got it wrong. Darn it. I take a look at that like, whoa, I got it wrong. Good for Missouri, man. They have really surprised me this year. I think they've surprised a lot of people in the country. And now I think if you are someone, and maybe you could put this upon myself, at least you could in the preseason before the season started. But if you are someone that is still doubting this Missouri team, don't. Luther Burden's an absolute baller. Brady Cook is a really, really good player. This is a defense that has a lot of very good pieces. They just held Tennessee to only 6 points. That is something that's really, really hard to do. Tennessee's got a lot of very, very good weapons. I think Missouri is deserving of a top 10 ranking, and I have them here at number 9. I absolutely love the way that this Missouri team has played, and you know what? Their shot to get into a New Year's Six bowl game here is looking pretty good. Now, will the committee have the same sentiment of Missouri that I am? We'll find that out tomorrow. But when I take a look at this Missouri team, I see a top 10 side, and right now I'm sitting them at number 9. Top 8 teams for me, though, have not changed. These are the 8 probably most likely teams to get into the college football playoff. Alabama still currently sits at number 8 only because the team above them in the Texas Longhorns at number 7 did beat them in week 2 this season. However, the Crimson Tide's chances to get into the playoff just keep increasing week after week. You've already set up a date with Georgia in the SEC championship game. I believe you have Chattanooga this week. That's going to be an easy win. And then the Iron Bowl. I'd watch out for Auburn. That can definitely be a sneaky game that can trip Alabama up. However, I think a lot is going to ride there in that SEC championship game. It is in all likelihood that Alabama goes and wins out, and the SEC championship going to have a lot on the line. That'll be a very, very fun game to watch. Texas just got a major blow this past week. Jonathan Brooks went down with an injury, tore his ACL. Oh, you hate to see it. He is done for the season. I mean, just a very, very talented back, very, very talented young back, might I add as well. He will be back next year for Texas, but man, you just hate to see it. That really could put a damper on Texas's college football playoff hopes, maybe their ability to win the Big 12 title. Now, look, they do have a lot of good running backs still back there in that room, and I think they're going to end up finding a guy to be able to step up and play some really good minutes. Will they be able to play Jonathan Brooks type minutes? I don't think so. I think Jonathan Brooks is a really, really good talent, is top 10 in the nation in total rush yards on the season, and I don't think Texas is going to be able to find a guy like Jonathan Brooks here over these next 2 weeks. Now, sure, there may be a guy that breaks out, plays really, really well, but Texas has got some tricky games here, and Jonathan Brooks was a huge part to that team. It'll be interesting to see how Texas does moving forward, and with Quinn Ewers back especially, that's going to really help their chances. But the injury to Jonathan Brooks could be absolutely devastating to this team. We'll see what happens with Texas, though, moving forward. They've probably already locked their spot in a Big 12 title game. The Oregon Ducks. You do have some games here on the schedule that potentially could trip you up. Now, it would be a very, very Oregon thing to do to go on the road in Tempe this week and then lose to the Arizona State Sun Devils. We've seen this song and dance happen before. Now, Herm Edwards' group back in, 2019, 2020, 2021, whatever year that ended up being, that was a much better Arizona State team than we see right now. However, Oregon historically has had trouble with some of these teams here in November, even back in October. You remember they used to have trouble with Cal, and then they lost to an Arizona team one year, still ended up making the college football playoff. But Oregon has historically had trouble with some of these teams here. And then, of course, you have what formerly was known as the Civil War with Oregon State in Autzen on Black Friday that final week. I believe it's on Black Friday. You can correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section below. But Oregon still got some tricky games here. Don't discount Arizona State. You got the former offensive coordinator, Kenny Dillingham. You know he's going to be motivated to beat his former team. Top 5 teams for me, though, have not changed, although the order, yeah, it definitely has. The one consistent thing is Ohio State is sat there at number 3. We'll talk about them when we get there. But Florida State and Washington, they have flipped places here. The sole reason being, I think Washington is really starting to play more and more like a top 4 team. Florida State continues to get out to these slow starts, continues to have trouble with some teams that really they should be able to blow by. Not saying that they should have been able to blow by Miami, but I thought they had more trouble with them than they really should have. Yes, the scoreboard probably doesn't tell the entire story. Probably should end up winning that game by a whole lot more than they did, but they've gotten out to slow starts against teams like Virginia Tech, against teams like Pitt, and they've needed a lot to pull away from them. Florida State is going to be a team here that I feel like would be pretty susceptible to losing. You have North Alabama. You're not going to lose that game. But then Florida coming up that final week, and then Louisville in the ACC championship game. You got to watch out for both of those games. Those are going to be some landmines there for Florida State. But Washington continues to build their resume. You already have a win over Oregon. Then you went and got a win against USC, albeit probably doesn't look as good as it does now. The win over Arizona just continues to look better and better as the season goes on. And now you got a win over a Utah Ute team as well. And another opportunity to boost that resume this week when you go on the road and play the Oregon State Beavers. To me right now, Washington is playing better football than Florida State, even though that defense definitely does give Husky fans heart attacks. I think Washington is playing like the better football team right now, and they right now are in my top 4. Likely have a date with Oregon if favorites are able to win out there in the Pac-12 championship game. Winner goes to the college football playoff. That should be a fun one if it ends up coming to fruition. Again, things not totally set in stone in the Pac-12 yet, but I think without a shadow of a doubt, your top 5 teams are right here. Now, you can make the case on why Oregon is better than Florida State. Absolutely. Hey, I really have no problem if you want to put Oregon here at 5 and drop Florida State down to 6. But I believe these are your top 5 teams, but I believe solely these are your top 3 teams. I think Georgia and Michigan are number 1 and number 2 in that order. We'll talk about why in a second, but Ohio State is sitting here at number 3, and Ohio State finally had that game where the offense explodes, right? Ohio State finally had the game where the offense got out to a really hot start. Now, granted, did they end the way that the Buckeye faithful envisioned? No, you would probably have liked to see them hang 50 there in that game. But albeit the defense played really, really well. The offense looked a whole lot better. Marvin Harrison Jr. was doing everything for this team. Kyle McCord had the best game that he has ever had as an Ohio State Buckeye, and a lot of people complaining about his footwork, was finally able to settle that down. However, I do not believe Ohio State is better than Michigan, is better than Georgia right now. Yes, they have all the pieces to be able to beat Michigan and beat Georgia, but it really comes down to who I would favor. I would favor Michigan over Ohio State, maybe by like a point or maybe half a point on a neutral field. I think those are 2 very, very evenly matched teams, and you saw what Michigan is capable of in the win over Penn State. Now, is Penn State maybe a little bit below what a lot of people thought they were? Okay, yeah, sure. But Michigan had Blake Corum run really, really well. Donovan Edwards finally was able to wake up in that game. J.J. McCarthy only threw 8 passes, but completed 7 of them. And it's just a really, really good game-managing quarterback. A lot of emotions there for Michigan as they found out that Jim Harbaugh was going to be, or I should say, was not going to be able to coach game days on the Michigan sideline. Was actually barred from game venues. But I mean, Michigan is playing some of the best football of anyone in the entire country. They've been my number 1 team for a long, long time. However, Georgia has finally ascended back to number 1. Georgia is finally padding that resume. You have a win over Missouri. You have a win over Ole Miss. You're going to get another opportunity here to get a win over a Tennessee team that the committee likely is going to have inside their top 25, maybe even their top 20. This Georgia team is padding their resume, and not only that, I think they're playing the best football out of anyone in the entire country. And if you have doubts about that, if you have questions about that, you can go talk to the Ole Miss Rebels and just see the absolute shellacking that Georgia was able to put on that team. If you are having doubts still of, this Georgia team is not as good as the previous 2 years, go rewatch that Ole Miss game in its entirety. Guarantee you a lot of you turned it off at halftime, didn't watch what Georgia did in the second half. My oh my. Besides one absolutely phenomenal catch from an Ole Miss wide receiver whose name is escaping my mind, Georgia dominated, and they were dominant from start to finish. Well, pretty much from start to finish. Yes, Ole Miss was able to keep it close, but Georgia just absolutely dominated the final 3 quarters of that game. Was not really close. Georgia is, in my opinion, playing the best football of anyone in the country right now. Still a lot of games to decide here in October. There are still a lot, or not in October, in November. There are still a lot of games that are going to lead to a lot of movements in my top 25. Oh boy, the conclusion to this season is going to be fun. But that's going to do it for my top 25 video. 2 more polls left, and then we will get the official college football playoff prediction, or college football final prediction rankings, whatever you want to call it. Hey, my name is Tailgate Nate. Remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. I'll see all of you guys in the next video. Preview predictions will start up tomorrow. Goodbye.